Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Well, I'm Carlos Gavidia. I do work at the Turing as an RSC. This is my very first participation in the RSCCon. This is my very first RSCCon talk. Well, the title is On the Tension Between Agile Methodologies and Research Software, and this is not only me. This is joint work with my colleagues from the Turing, Martin O'Reilly, and Callie Westerling. Well, this talk will change a bit the tone compared with the talk that we just saw. So the previous talk was about we can do Agile in academia. I'm a bit more of a pessimist that there's some time that Agile is a bit harder to apply in academia. And I will give you 3 reasons for that. But I also finish the talk in a lighter note that there are some alternatives that we can adopt. So we can get some of the benefits of Agile, but not in the proper way. So yeah, this talk is also about software process. So I won't be talking code or programming, but about software process. And software process understood as the activities, tasks, and roles that we engineers adopt when we build software. So back in the golden days of software development, when there were no computer scientists and software was built by mathematicians and physicists, the software process was no process. So people just did software as is in an ad hoc manner. And well, according to this paper, in those days, software development was not an engineering discipline, it was more like an artisanal craft, something tailor-made. But although in those days, maybe people didn't need process, like we can see here on the slide, is Frances Spence, an American pioneer. She didn't have a degree in computer science, she was a mathematician with a minor in physics, and she did amazing things. But time passed, software became bigger, became more complex, the World Wide Web came, and the need for process arose. One of the processes that arise in this point in time, they were quite rigid, detailed, and extremely formal. What you're seeing here on the slide is a diagram from the Rational Unified Process book. So back in 2005, when I was being trained as a software developer, this is the thing that they told me. This is how I should be building software. As you can see here, we have a set of roles. We have a designer, a software architect, a design review. These roles are in charge of activities like use case analysis, identify design elements, and each one of these activities, you have artifacts as input and artifacts as output. If we look at use case analysis, we have a design model that goes in, and the output is a use case realization and an analysis class. Back in these days, we have something called unified modeling language that was widely used. We did diagrams, and they were really important for us. Well, that was the 80s and 90s, but we reached 2001, and there was a huge opposition to this way of building software. So in 2001, 17 practitioners gathered together and developed this amazing document, where they proposed a new vision for building software. That instead of being really process-heavy, document-heavy, formal, they envisioned software development as something focused on human effort and experience. They encoded their vision in 4 values and 12 principles. And from this vision, we have many Agile methodologies that implement this vision. 2 of the most popular ones are Scrum and also Extreme Programming. And that was 2001. Now we are in 2025, and I will make a bold claim that Agile is the mainstream way of building software, at least in industry. Agile is used by small startups, it's used by big tech giants like Microsoft, that we're seeing here. This is a quote from one paper where the people at Microsoft, they describe that they use Agile when they engage with customers, when they develop machine learning solutions, and they're really happy with it. Using Agile, they adapt to changing customer needs, and they speed up the development. So in industry, it's quite successful. Now, that's industry. But let's move back to our neighborhood, to academia and research. In this paper that I found, where they talk about industry-academia collaboration, they mentioned that we in academia, we have a reputation that we're a bit stuck in the old ways, that we do not have a process. And we as a community recognize that that's a problem. There are many, many initiatives that are to address this lack of process in academic software development. One way is the Turing way. They have a chapter about collaboration. Their commentaries as well, like they have some comments about like some structured process for developing software in academia. So like today I will try to address the question like, if in industry Agile is so successful, should we just go ahead and copy it and adopt it in academic context? And as my colleague from the Turing said in this quotation, like, we tried and with mixed results, like sometimes trying to port like Agile as is to an academic context does not work. Well, that's the experience of my colleague. That's my experience as well. And in this second part of the talk, I will try to elaborate on why this is, why there's a misalignment between Agile expectations and the realities of academia. So I will talk about like 3 tensions, and one of these tensions is related to one of the Agile values from the manifest. So the first tension I want to talk about is the interacting individual tension. If you remember from like 10 slides ago, the first Agile value is that we should value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Like to give an example from industry, we have a company like Amazon, featured on the slide. They have a very big development team, 200 engineers, and they want to have like interacting individuals collaborating. When you have that size of team, it's really tricky. So one of the solutions is like, let's split them in smaller teams. And they have this Amazon model that states that you should be able to feed your team with 2 pizzas. And I think in American terms, it means like 5, 7 people. That's your team size. That's how they address this. We will have individuals interacting in cooperation by having smaller teams. Now, if you have your 5, 7 people, one of the ways of interacting and cooperating is this practice called pair programming. So for the one that don't know what this goes, is like, if you have a development team and you have a set of tasks, you do not assign tasks to individual developers. You assign tasks to pairs of developers, and the expectation is that these 2 developers work on a single computer, like here. I have used this technique for more than a year in industry, and I was really, really skeptical at the beginning. But I need to say that at the end, I kind of like it. Like, it has really many, many benefits. It's great for knowledge sharing. You will be pairing with most of the people in your team. You do not need code reviews anymore because you're being reviewed all the time by your pair. And it's a great tool for onboarding. Like, you get a new engineer, you drop in on a pair, and really quickly they will be up to speed. Now, like, when I went back to academia, well, pair programming wasn't an option for me. And well, the reason is like for doing pair programming, you need at least 2 engineers. And at least most of the time in my experience in academia, I was the only person building software. Oh, I did a PhD. During my PhD, I was the only one building software. I did a postdoc as well. It was only me writing code. And even right now at the Turing, most of my projects have been only me, like building software. I think this is a phenomenon that's all over academia. We're really, really lacking resources. What you're seeing here on the slide is a quotation from the author of the Python tutor, this great tool for like teaching developers how to code in Python. And that's usually the case. In an academic project, we have no full-time software development staff. So given that we have so very few resources, pairing is not an option. So that's tension number 1. Let's move to another tension, what I'm calling here the customer collaboration tension. The second Agile value is we should value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. As we saw before, like in methodologies like Scrum, we have this role of the product owner, a representative of the customer that's part of the team. They will come to all the meetings, they will give ideas, and they will provide feedback. And one of the ceremonies where we can gather feedback from a product owner, for example, is a daily Scrum. As it was mentioned before, daily Scrum, they happen daily. They should be like time boxed to 15 minutes. People should say like what they did, what they plan to do, and if they do any blockers. I have used daily Scrums a lot in my time in industry, but I wasn't able to use them in academia. And I need to say, like, even in my time in industry, like, daily Scrums are really, most of the time, uninteresting. You just say what you did, what you plan to do, and that's it. But in some key situations that are really important, there's always a time where the product owner will raise, for example, a very important bug in production that you need to react really quickly. And in this situation, it's really great that you have a daily, frequent opportunity for checking with your customer. Now, daily scrums in academia. As I mentioned before, I tried, but it's really hard for me to get like a daily meeting with my customer. In this slide, I'm referring to customers for RSE that are members of the academic community, lecturers, professors, postdocs, or PhDs. And as is mentioned on this slide, like, well, academics are really busy, and sometimes we can say that they are overworked many, many times. So life in academia means that you need to write papers, you need to review papers, you need to organize wonderful conferences like RSECon, you need to do your admin, serve on committees, and you need to mentor the next generation of researchers. So given that this happens in academia, it's sometimes a lot to ask to them to meet with us daily, even if it's for 15 minutes. And even like nowadays that projects become a bit more complex, so we have people from different universities, then you need to deal with time zones, many departments, and given that sometimes it's just impossible to find a slot where everyone can meet. And the final tension that I want to discuss today is the working software tension. So we have an Agile value that says like we should value working software over comprehensive documentation. And at least in industry, like it's really easy to link working software with value, because on a company like Microsoft or like Google, they want working software that generates profits. And given that software is a key driver of their profits, and Agile practice like test-driven development or TDD from extreme programming, it makes a lot of sense. So you want your software to be perfect because every bug costs money. I think there was a TDD workshop yesterday, but for the ones that are not familiar with the technique, it's like whenever you have a feature to build, you start by writing a test. At the beginning, of course, because you have nothing, your test will fail. In TDD jargon, it was red. Then you make a really basic implementation, so your test pass, it goes green. And given that you have now a test covering your requirement, you can refactor and do a more elegant implementation. And you iterate over this. A particular TDD comes with a lot of benefits. First of all, you have a really high test coverage, and that's really, really good. And also by this practice of like testing and refactoring, like the design, the architecture of your system becomes over time really, really elegant. Now that's industry. Let's go back to academia. So like in industry, we need working software high quality because money comes from it. In academia, in some of the projects, I need to say not all of them, software it's a means to an end. And the end, in many cases, is an academic publication. Publish or perish, the good old rule of academia. About what we talked before, that many times academic software projects are really scarce in resources, you need to make a judgment call. How much of your time you devote for building new features, running new experiments, and how much of your time you devoted for writing tests. Yeah, there aren't that many engineer hours, so you need to decide. So those are my three tensions. That's why Agile sometimes is challenging in academia. But I think I have how much more time? Yeah, 15 more minutes. So it was really a dark and gloom. Now let's look for some options. Like, although like the practices that I discussed before, I don't think they're suitable for academia sometimes, I'm going to propose like some alternatives, some practices that I will claim you can get some of the values from the original ones. They are not perfect, but I do think that they deliver value. And this like action of like bringing a software process and adapting it to your context in software engineering is called like software process tailoring. And as you can see here on the slide, and it was also discussed before, some people see software process tailoring as like a bad word. It's something you shouldn't do. You compromise the purity of your original design. But I will agree with the other presenters that sometimes it's what you need. In the Agile community, what I'm going to present today, they will call it fake Agile, Agile in name only, and I'm fine with that. Maybe I'm doing fake Agile, but I do believe that these practices have some value, and maybe I will convince you that they do. Okay, so in the second part, we have a value of individuals and interactions, collaborating. I propose pair programming as an option, but I will claim here that we can get most of those benefits using a practice like code review. So like pair programming with code review, we get knowledge sharing. If you have a pull request in GitHub, you have a really interesting discussion going forward, changing ideas. And you will increase code quality, definitely, because you have more people looking at the same code base. It's definitely cheaper. So it's easy to ask a colleague to review your code for half an hour than ask your colleague to sit with you for 8 hours building a feature in pair programming. I dare to say. But because it's cheaper, it's also maybe an interaction of lower quality than pair programming. It's asynchronous, and it can be really slow. If you have engaged in code review, you probably suffered of the problem of like, I will post a review, and the feedback will come like weeks later. So like speed gets, developing feature becomes slower. But I find this is more suitable in academia. Code review is really, really widely used in the Turing. Second option alternative. So I was mentioning that in industry, the customer collaboration is like done with roles like product owner. You meet with them daily during daily scrums. But I think we can collaborate with the users asynchronously using task boards, but a specific type of task boards, like an online task board they're using GitHub or Jira. And again, like this is really, really bad for the Agile purists. Your task board should be on your wall, an information beacon. But I think that you can get some of the benefits by using an online one. There are some caveats to this. So like, you need to put an effort and make sure that whenever, like if it's like a Saturday morning, when the professor will go and check the board should tell the academic what you're doing, what have you finished, and what's coming next. Again, this is a compromise. In comparison with the daily scrum, we don't have the benefit of the face-to-face interaction. And by the way, I think there's an Agile principle about like, we value face-to-face interaction, but sometimes that's hard. We do rely on the academics to keeping an eye on the online task board. But it's definitely more calendar friendly, so you can have people in different time zones. They will check the board, they will know what's going on, and we can take action if needed. And the final alternative that I want to share with you today, it's related to the working software intention. So in industry, you can use test-driven development. But as I was mentioning before, software engineering time is scarce in academic projects. So sometimes you need to make a judgment call. So I think many, many times, sometimes it's better to do automated testing, meaning that you start building the feature, and then you make a call of which part of your code you will test and or not, than just test everything. And like, don't get me wrong, like I really, really do like TDD, and whenever I run a project where I have a lot of time, I do use TDD. But in some others, it's just a luxury that you cannot afford. And also you need to take into account that the test suite is also software artifact. So the more tests that you add, your test suite will take longer to run, and it will become bigger, and it will be more likely to be broken by a new feature, so you need to maintain it. So there are all these variables that you need to take into account. And I do think, like, in most of the time, using automated testing is the way to go. Well, this is my final slide. So I've been talking about, like, Agile in industry, Agile in academia. I wanted to share with you how much Agile do we use, like, at my employer, the Reg team at the Turing. So we are 45 engineers. I asked them to fill the survey many, many times over Slack, and I gathered 21 responses. I'm really proud of that. Well, let me tell you how much Agile do we do at the Turing. So at the Turing, we do more automated testing than TDD. I asked about user stories, another really neat technique for gathering requirement, but at least in the Turing is really not widely adopted. Pair programming, we do not do it that much. We do more code reviews, as I mentioned before, but there is a core of passionate Reg people that really want to see pair programming like bring into our culture, and that might be coming. Yeah, daily scrums, like really unpopular, at least in Reg, like we don't do them. More people meet once per week. We really embrace task boards. We use the GitHub version, a lot of them, and it's the main way of like managing our projects. Do I have time? I do have time. Well, to finish, so that's Reg. I don't know, maybe in Reg we're an outlier, and maybe like the user software engineering community is really different regarding like Agile adoption. So if you want to help me for gathering the opinion of the whole community, please you can scan this QR code. It's the same survey. It won't take you more than 4 minutes. And you can tell me a bit about like, how in your daily work do you adopt some of these practices or not. Well, the hope is that I will gather like some answers, and if the results are interesting, and the program committee agrees, maybe I can share these results in the next edition of RSCon. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you so much for the amazing presentation. And really, it gave a different perspective for Agile, and also the tensions were really the real tensions. So thank you. So time for the question is now.
Okay, first question. How can we tweak stand-up scrums to minimize the boring update feeling? Oh, I don't have an answer to that. We do not do daily scrums in the Turing. We do weekly updates, and they work quite well because like in a week, there's more of a chance that something interesting that needs to be discussed happens. So in the Turing, I see this like weekly checking working. During my PhD, we have a weekly check-in that was like 2 hours long. So I would advise against doing that. Like, keep it short and keep them like focused. What have you did? What do you plan to do? And especially the blockers. That's it? Oh. Is this a mutually editable board or something partners look at just for information? So what we do in the Turing, yes, is a mutually editable board. And in the GitHub issues that are the ones that go into our board, we engage in discussion as well. So yeah, instead of checking in like in a daily scrums, this discussion happens asynchronously on the GitHub issue. So yeah, so we edit as engineers, the PDRAs, and if you got an engaged PI professor, they will also engage in discussions in the GitHub issue. Yeah. Okay, you mentioned occasional beneficial result from the daily scrum, like identifying a problem. Do you think these problems would not otherwise have shown up, or would it simply have taken longer to identify them? Yeah, that's the thing, like, because you're checking daily with the product owner, at least in the industry, your time between something really bad happening and the team taking action, it's at most a day. And that's the benefit. And the price you pay for that is that many, many times you have this boring update. Yeah, like, is there another way of accomplishing this? Like, they can give a phone call to your boss, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, so that's the main benefit that I see from daily scrums. You can react quickly. The most delay is a day. Okay, pair programming is a great way of learning, but how would you implement it on projects that have only one RSC working on it? Ooh, pair programming with one person. That's a really, really hard question. But something that I have seen is, like, for example, I had an intern, Abby. She might be somewhere here. Yeah, like, although I wasn't part of her project, she was working with a PDRA, sometimes we engage occasionally in some, like, really, really short pairing sessions, like a couple of hours or an hour. Maybe that's a better way of doing it. Because, yeah, like, the Scrum by the book, like, way of doing it is like, yeah, you should be working with another developer 8 hours a day. maybe that's an option. Just keep pairing like constraint to only really short sessions. I tried that, and it worked unless Abby disagrees. That's what we tried. Okay, few companies actually get Agile right, especially the people over processes part looking at you, Scrum. How can we, the research community, avoid falling into the trap of doing Agile because the cool kids do mindset? I'm not sure how to answer that. So like, the company where I like use most Agile is ThoughtWorks. And well, they claim to do Agile the right way. So they have a lot of speakers. And yeah, like when I joined them, like, I thought like, oh, this is just a cult. We're doing Agile because it's the right way to do, but I saw a value on that. So all the techniques, even pair programming that was really, really skeptical of using that, it really, really does work. So I think like in industry, you can get a lot of benefit from Agile. And I think in academia, we need to make a choice. So we have these processes, yeah, we have Agile, we have some other ways as well. Like, and we need to keep what works for us and discard what it doesn't work for us. Maybe I should have put that slide, but some of the things that I think they work on industry and academia are retrospectives. So you work for a sprint for a couple of weeks, then you gather together with your team, and you talk about it. So we use this process. What works? What didn't? And you adapt and you adjust. I think that's the best way of doing that. Give things a try Agile, try something else, and after a period of time, like talk. And we're humans, we're different. Like something that will work on Turing, maybe they don't work on Manchester. You just do a process that works for you and your team. I think that's the best way of doing software processes in general. Okay, another question. I have time. Maybe that's the last one, right? Yeah. About the comment from the Alan Turing Institute about the lack of effectiveness in Agile. Was it Scrum specifically that was found to be ineffective, or was applying the Agile principles more generally found to be ineffective? I'm not sure. So yeah, like the quotation was from one of my colleagues, and that's what he said. He said, like, from my perspective, I find Agile quite be ineffective. So I didn't get permission to like release the name of this person, but I will ask him later. But yeah, he just mentioned like Agile, and yeah, sadly, like there are many, many versions for Agile going on. But yeah, that might be. Maybe like this colleague of mine like had a really like distorted version of what Agile is. Although like I did get many comments, so when you go into the survey, you will see that I asked like which practices do you like, what practices you don't like, and what practices do you want to like embrace. And many, many of my colleagues, they mentioned that Scrum specifically, they seem really like process heavy. There are many, many meetings, many, many artifacts that they add a really like high overhead to projects. We have that version, but yeah, like, I'm not sure how much of a Scrum they were talking about.